Welcome to Raiders on the Record, the podcast featuring Hastings High School athletics. I'm Athletic Director Trent Hansen. My colleague Tim Hanneberg and I work together to bring you the stories of Raider sports. We are thrilled to share conversations with the athletes, coaches, and alumni that represent Raider Nation. Check back weekly and be sure to share this podcast with your friends in the Raiders Network. Today's podcast features Doug Plumb. Doug is a 2006 graduate of Hastings High School. He was a repeat all-conference basketball player who graduated as the school's all-time leading scorer and was named All-State his senior year, one of only two boys basketball players to have earned that honor in the last 25 years. Doug played collegiately at Minnesota State University in Mankato and at the University of British Columbia in Canada. He played professional basketball in Europe, worked for Nike North America, where he was connected to the Jordan brand and the NBA, and he is currently the head coach of the London Lightning professional basketball team in Ontario, Canada. Doug is renowned for his one-of-a-kind drive and work ethic that has led him to every corner of the basketball world, including starting his own instructional academy and building his own gym. This was a great conversation, and we hope you enjoy it. Let's just start with where you are now and what you're doing now. Tell us where you're coming to us from, what's happening kind of in Doug's life today. What's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm coaching a professional basketball team in Eastern Canada. It's called the London Lightning. It would kind of be, for the hockey fans out there, it would kind of be somewhere between what like major juniors hockey is and probably like the ECHL. So like 2 clicks away from the NBA. And yeah, I mean, it's been cool. I've been doing this now for, I think 5 years. Dating myself here. But I'm in BC still right now, and be out in Ontario again on Tuesday. Things have been pushed back because of COVID, but yeah, I've been doing that. So excited the season is short this year. It's only about 4 months, but yeah, it's fun. Keeps me young, kind of.
So you're coaching pro basketball, which is incredible. I also know you've got some of your own camps, clinics, and some of your own independent stuff going on. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in I think it was 2018. I mean, when I stopped playing, we'll get into this a little bit later, but I started working with kids and stuff just because I wanted to stay connected to the game. And in 2019, I launched a company called Grit. And like anything in this world, I think when you do something, you try to do it with the right heart's intent, it kind of takes off like gangbusters. And I started it as like just a nonprofit essentially. And within 3 months, it went like gangbusters. So yeah, I've been doing that. I mostly work with kids that are kind of like I was, a little bit psychotic, but it's fun. I'm actually in the process of building a gym right now out here as well, which will be cool. Sometimes I'm a professional basketball coach, and sometimes I paint walls for my facility. So in the process of doing that right now. And yeah, man, things are good. It's it's crazy time for all of us right now, but as good as can be. So that's but the whole youth basketball thing, it's fun because I see, now coaching at a professional level, like I have guys on my team that have been McDonald's All-Americans, and they're playing like they should be in the league, but there's usually a disconnect. And by the time that you get there, I mean, I would argue even by the time that I get a lot of kids, because I don't usually work with athletes that are, below like 13, 14, because the type of intensity that we're going at is just too much for a young kid. But try to instill those values and the intangibles that will set people up for success later on in life, because whether it's basketball or not, but I see just like a void of kind of old school principles. And that's not to say, these kids, they're so much more advanced from like a skill level than I ever was, or like we ever were. But yeah, that's why I called it Grit, because I thought like what's really missing is just tenacity and grit. Because I mean, you could be as talented as you want. Like I was saying with these guys that I have, that some of them most of them are high major Division I guys. I've had guys that were in the NBA. I've had all different kinds of levels of guys, but they're usually there for a reason, and it's usually things that they can control. So it's been fun to kind of connect that back and try to, I guess start a little bit earlier and give them things that I learned from people like you along the way of just like how you need to operate in your life and really controlling the intangible. So yeah, that's kind of a quick micro shot of what I've been up to, what I'm up to right now, at least. But
yeah, well, it kind of sets the stage. So, this Raiders on the Record podcast is a pretty cool opportunity just to connect our current local community to alumni and coaches and just all different pieces of the extended Raider Nation, right? So you're here because of your former threads and connections and, and a graduate of Hastings High School. It's fun to just kind of start with where people are at. And so, I mean, I'm not sure how many people listening have ever met a professional basketball coach before, right? Or kind of have that context. So it's kind of fun to just lay that on top just to start. But, when you talk about the intangibles and grit and tenacity and perseverance, those are words to describe you, right? The 14, 15-year-old that we first met when you moved to Hastings and the one that we've continued to know through all the years. So let's cycle back a little bit. All right. Tell us, how'd you end up in this zip code?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm 33 now. And when I was, I think in the ninth grade, I mean, I was obsessed with basketball. I was just kind of a kid that like really gravitated to the game at a young age. I loved the fact that you could, obviously I'm from Canada, so hockey is like the mainstay here. But the thing with hockey is that my parents were going through a divorce, and like my mom was a shift worker and my dad was kind of working in and out of town. So I could never get to hockey practices. I actually joke with my mom about that all the time. I'm like, Mom, I'm a 6'4" white guy from Canada and you put me in basketball. Come on, I'd be in the show. But yeah, I really gravitated towards just the fact that it was kind of like my place of refuge and I didn't need anybody else. I could just go in the gym and it was like therapeutic, right? You could just kind of zone out and really be present in that moment. And that really resonated with me that I didn't need anything. I mean, the financial barrier was very low to be able to join basketball. So fell in love with it at a young age. And then I was a little bit of a loner growing up. And that was just kind of my place. Like I remember being 12 years old and like keeping these notebooks and like I was psychotic. Like I wasn't leaving the gym. I wasn't hanging out with my friends until like that was done. And then it got to a point where, I started to get a little bit of recognition here locally in BC. But at the time, like there was no Instagram, there was no YouTube, there was none of that. And I didn't really know like where I stood. I just knew that, you put me next to that guy, I'm willing to work harder than that guy, but I don't know if I'm better than him. And I started to see people. I made this thing called the Provincial Team out here. And it was like the top 12 athletes in the province. I think we got about 3 million people. It's pretty comparable to the size of Minnesota, but not really like the athletic pool that is in the US or what I perceive the US to be. And I really wanted to play college basketball. I remember when I was not college, but also pro. I remember when I was 10 years old, my dad asked me to write out my goals. And I had this piece of paper that I had next to my bed. I actually had it when I was in Hastings. And I wrote that I wanted to play college basketball. I wrote that I wanted to play NCAA basketball in the US, and I didn't know how the heck to do it. So I'm in the ninth grade, and we're at the provincial championship. I decided to play on the grade 9 team instead of playing juniors, which is like JV essentially. So I'm playing like, 14-year-olds in Canada, and I'm tearing this thing up because just like, it wasn't as serious up here, right? So anyways, we get to provincials, and I think we had probably like 55 points, and I must have had 42 of them. And we lose to a team that was just like trash. And the way that I was living my life at that time, for like now I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like how did my parents let me operate like this? Like I was so single-minded focused. But we lose the game, and my dad was kind of entertaining job offers in the US at the time. And I just was like, you know what? Like there's no way that I can see this career path going the way that I want it to go if I stay where I'm at, because I'm big fish, small pond, so to speak. And I wanted to know what was really out there. That's one thing that I think is lacking. I mean, we can get into that later, touch on it now, but the whole AAU scene and the way that like youth basketball is going, it's become so monetized. These kids never really get exposed to like anything else or be humbled at a young age. So they don't know where they stand, and it's bigger than basketball. They just won't go outside of their comfort zone, right? So I really crave that because I wanted to know. I didn't want to just like get there, take someone's word for it that everything was going to be okay. So my dad was on the fence about this job. He was apprehensive about leaving, like leaving me and my brother essentially, and going and taking the job in Minnesota. It was with Ed Peterson. He had I remember if you remember Ed, Heidi's dad.
Mhm.
So he had a like decking and railing company. My dad was kind of a consultant for them, and then, but he was waiting. He didn't want to make the decision kind of preemptively to go down there. And then I kind of forced his hand after the game. I was pissed off, and I said, "We're moving, like we're moving," because I couldn't believe that like we were losing to these teams, and I was so obsessed. I couldn't get it how like these guys just didn't like it, like they didn't love it like I loved it, right? So anyways, I kind of kept that hush hush. I remember my dad was like calling you or something, and we didn't know. Like I had no idea at the time. I just figured, okay, I know that I can't be here. I know I need to be somewhere else. And the way that I perceived the U.S. was it was all the same. It was all just like these LeBron James type dudes, and I'm like, okay. So from that moment forward, I started working at a like a threshold that was just like absolutely asinine. Like I'm talking 3 a days. I was going 6 to 7 hours every single day as a 13 or 14-year-old kid, and yeah, I remember my dad was like calling you and stuff and trying to get like the inside scoop, and he was trying to get like game film and bring it to a public school coach. And I remember thinking, I look back now, I'm like, that's so insane. Like you must have thought he was nuts. But that's just kind of how we've always been. Like if you want something, don't let anything stand in your way, and just kind of be willing to be vulnerable, put yourself out there. So yeah, I show up at Hastings and didn't know what the heck I was getting into. Moved my whole life, leave my friends. I ended up going to 5-star basketball camp before that, actually. It was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm flying as an unaccompanied minor. I wanted to get like a taste of basketball in the US before I came into high school. I go down there, see J.R. Smith, Sean Singletary, Kyle Lowry. There was a guy named Goran Suton. There was another guy named Cheyenne Moore, I believe. Russell Robinson, he played at Kansas. I had Jim Boeheim was there. I don't think Krzyzewski was there. Anyways, laundry list of all these guys. Peter Vesey was reporting. Remember Peter Vesey?
For sure.
Back in the day, there was no AAU. So, anyways, I'm playing at this camp, and I get absolutely obliterated. Like I left the camp, and I'm like flying back to Minnesota now. I'm thinking, man, I'm not even gonna make the team. Like I'm absolutely screwed. And then I remember showing up at Hastings, and I was so paranoid that I wouldn't make the team because there was obviously no guarantees, and I was, in Canada our cutoff dates are different, so I was actually younger than a lot of people who were even a grade younger than me. Like my senior year, I remember Trent Vetters was like 6 months older than me. So yeah, I was just like really, really paranoid, and that kind of fueled turning into a decent career there in high school because I was just so afraid that people would be right. When I moved down there, I was so paranoid of like not making it because, you're a 14-year-old kid. That world that you live in your own head is everything to you. You don't know. It's like having a bad hair day. Nobody really cares. If I went down there and failed and ended up back in Canada, then whatever, like no one's going to think anything of it. But for me at the time, it was like the only thing that mattered was proving that I could play at that level. So I'm going into this preseason thinking, yo, like I'm playing against those dudes that I just played at 5-star. And then I remember I couldn't get into the gym. Like I have this story that I tell kids still to this day about like me getting into the gym in Hastings. I could not get a hoop down in my life because of like the fear of litigation, right? Remember like hitting you up, offering to pay teachers, offering to mark their papers, going to meet the athletic. I'm a 14-year-old kid going to meet I just turned 15. Going to meet the athletic director, writing the superintendent, writing a letter to the editor of the newspaper. Couldn't get a hoop down. The lights were off because people had the walking track. So I'd be like doing basketball drills in the dark, be dribbling my basketballs outside the janitor's closet to piss him off so that he'd hopefully put a hoop down for me. And then, yeah, at the end of the day, they ended up breaking and they ended up folding. So I always tell these kids, I'm like, yo, if you want something bad enough, you're going to figure out a way to get it done. And that kind of routine that I developed really, really like in that time where I moved down there and I had no friends, I had nobody, I didn't know anyone, right? And I was scared that I'd go home and everyone back home was saying, you're going to end up back home. Like it's too good for you down there kind of thing. And that really, I remember like those from school started at 7:50, I think it was. And like, I'd be there at I remember going out the door 5 a.m., get there at 5:15 and do my workout. And that really shaped kind of what has become this passion of basketball, was just like the belief in what the process of improvement can do for you, and not the process in terms of an outcome. That became therapeutic because it was my way to deal with the anxiety of unknown. And then from that, I just kind of really fell in love with just that process of self-improvement, just for what it is.
So let's pull on that thread a little, and I'll back up a half step and say a few things. One, your dad came at things very diplomatically and very appropriately. I know you kind of laugh about it a little bit, but he did. The guy's a pro. You know what I mean? So he asked important questions, but he never came at things in any way that was unethical. And we hit it off right away because I'm like, listen, these are the rules we have to follow. And I think there was immediately a mutual respect that there was nothing guaranteed on his end, and there was nothing guaranteed on our end. It's like, just, hey, kids move in and out of here all the time. Let's roll in and just see what happens, So without knowing all the backstory that you just described, right? I mean, you talk about a massive leap of a lot of things, whether it be a leap of faith or chasing your dreams, your goals, whatever you want to call it. You literally moved your whole life to pursue this thing, and for you to happen to be basketball. That was the most important thing in your life, which is pretty fascinating. And then I will always remember that 5-star story because, you talk about, so I laugh at it now, thinking like, you're going to come to the gym, and it could have been any gym in Minnesota, by the way, or Iowa or California. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be the same as 5-star. And so it's just, I just look back at that, like where your head must have been. It's incredible. So you started transitioning into what I was going to kind of ask you next. So you arrive here going to grade 10, right? So you're kind of looking at, kind of your next 3 years of high school. There's a lot of nature nurture colliding in this thing, right? So you've got a way that you're wired to your credit, and maybe sometimes to your detriment, right? With the intensity and the commitment and the persistence. Your dad, your parents, they're willing to kind of green light this move and make it work for you. Just tell me a little bit more then about the mindset in that, maybe that first year or the first 2 years, in terms of, man, what was your approach? How did you come at it? You started talking about the morning workouts, but just, I can't imagine all the things that were going on in your mind as a kid.
I think it was even bigger than my love of basketball, to be honest, because I found, everyone's got different upbringings and stuff like that. And my parents go through a divorce, and like, I just kind of like, I guess a young kid, kind of isolate yourself. And like I said, I really took refuge in sport, because that was kind of like my time away from, you're a young kid, you see your parents split up, that like kind of that affects you. So I became addicted to that for sure, just like that time alone. And I really started to appreciate just my own company. But from a mentality standpoint, it was much more driven at first for the love of the game and a distraction, I would say, away from like just real life and what you build up in your own head as a young kid in terms of your fears and all that kind of stuff. But eventually it turned into more of, which is what, I don't even know how to frame this. It turned into something where I was, someone told me I couldn't do something, and then I was like, no, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I remember always looking back to like, it was always the next thing. I had an outcome goal for sure, where this is where I wanted to go to, but I had no idea like how I was going to navigate that. The only thing that I could control was what I could do every single day. And then that worked hand in hand. It was like a positive feedback loop, because the anxiety that I was having about the unknown as a young kid moving to a different country on a day-to-day basis, and then the unknown of how the heck I'm going to get to my long-term goal. But like the only thing that I learned that I could control was my personal habits on the day-to-day basis. And that was it. Right. So that fueled like this obsession in me, because every day was a competition versus the last day. Every day was just be like a little bit better. Right. And then that started to create like this real sense of competitiveness in me, because I wasn't competing against anyone else. I was so frustrated with like every day that I wasn't like, my progress wasn't like this every single day. Right. Mm-hmm. And then once you start to, you really need to have that like blind faith, and you really need to fall in love with the process of pursuing whatever the heck your goals are, and loving it even when it sucks sometimes, just from like a personal satisfaction level. Like you do something hard every day, your day is already off to a good start, and that empowers you. But once I started to get a little bit of kind of positive feedback, like when I made the team, then it was so ingrained in me that I was addicted. There's no way I could get away from that. It was like my drug, essentially, right? Where that was just what I did every single day. And if I didn't do that, now it wasn't even like I was chasing like a high every day. It was like I couldn't not do it because I would get so much anxiety about not, that someone was working harder than me. Because in my mind, I was still living on this notion of, first of all, people told me I wasn't going to be successful back home. And then second of all, I thought that every American player was the most driven, psychotic athlete on the face of the earth. So I was like chasing this ghost of work ethic that I would never live up to ever. There's no way that you could ever hit that every single day. But looking back, was that healthy? Would people nowadays say that that's healthy? Probably not. But it's been beneficial for me for sure. And that's, that ties back to what I try to teach these kids. Everybody now wants like to be told it's okay and not have their feelings hurt. Like sometimes things just suck and you got to get through it. And from that process, you become a lot mentally tougher. So from that time, my life was imperative for where I'm at now. And it kind of shaped everything that I do.
So on that note, I've shared with people over the years, one thing that's really fun here is to kind of walk up and down the hallway and we look at the all-state athletes and the state tournament teams and some of those type of things. And, as I mature and age into the position I'm in now, right, you get this gift of seeing athletes at all levels and all these type of things. And I'll get asked fun questions, best athlete you've ever seen, or what was the most fun team you ever watched, sport neutral. Who's the, and so anytime the dynamic comes up about work ethic, your name's at the top of the list. Anyone that was here when you were here, or if they're asking my opinion as someone who's seen athletes here for over 35 years, there has literally never been a kid, a boy or a girl in any sport that's ever put in the work that you did. And it is a list of one. There's a next group of people that are pretty incredible. We've got a storied athletic history. But when I say that, what was your routine? What did you do to get better? Kind of how did you approach it? Just kind of give people an idea of kind of what that approach was like. So when I say that, right, hardest working athlete I've ever seen, what does that mean?
Well, what did it actually look like from a tangible standpoint every day?
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, every single morning, I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, and it took me a while to wake up. And I started meditating without even knowing that I was meditating because I was scared of what my day was going to encompass every single day. So I'd have to like frame my mind before my body was even ready. I would eat my breakfast. We would go to the car. My dad every single morning would make me go heat up the car, and then I'd come back in because he promised that he would drive me to school every day as long as I committed that I wanted to do it. So I'd go to the car. We'd drive to the gym. I would do my little warm up. And I always did, I did the same workout every single day for 3 years, every day. I would go through like my ball handling routine, which was about 15 minutes. And that was kind of to get my central nervous system going. I would work on touch. Then I'd work into shooting off the catch. Then I'd work on shooting off the dribble. And then I'd work on game situations. And then it would always be competitive down the stretch. And then always throughout that whole process, there was punishment every day so that I was maintaining competitive in my workouts. And I would put time and score pressure on everything that I would do because I figured, a lot of people look like heroes in their workouts. But for me, I was like, I don't have time to everything is on the line here. So I can't leave anything to chance. And I wanted my workouts to be way harder, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint than what anyone else could ever put on me. So that I knew and I could tangibly track, because that feeds into like the anxiety I was talking about earlier, where I needed to know if I was tangibly improving because I was so just steadfast on reaching my goals, right? After school, there was always like volleyball practice or whatever in the preseason. So I would get on the rubber court and I would shoot there too, because I would make between 500 to 700 shots a day, every day, regardless game day or not, it didn't matter, right? And then I actually took principles of conditioning. And I remember day one, I'm in there and they were doing this whatever testing. I never really lifted weights in my life. And there was a girl who was a grade 10, like pre-Olympic swimmer. And she was deadlifting like 225. And I couldn't bench press 25 pounds. So from that day forward, I promised myself that I would never not be strong ever again. Because I saw the level of kind of where my body was at and where everyone else is at. And then that just stuck. So that was it every single day. go home at nighttime. I would often go to the YMCA in Woodbury too with my dad because there was no YMCA. So I would go if I hadn't finished my workout or I wanted to play with older guys because I couldn't play in the preseason. I would go do that, and then I'd wake up and I'd do it all over again, do some homework in the car ride home, and that was that.
I appreciate you kind of painting the picture, right? Because I think it's incredible for people to think about, and I can vouch for it because I watched it for 3+ years. You did have outcome goals. You were very articulate about those. You worked on those, but yet there was this overwhelming sense that your drive was to become the best version of yourself. And if that meant that you were going to start or come off the bench, okay. If that meant that you were going to be all state or all conference, okay. You've got this, you're aspiring to have this post-secondary opportunity, but if it doesn't come, I guess my point is, I think at some level, you had this sense that it's about really self-actualization and being the best person I can be, and being the best player I can be. But I'm going to push to find out how high that ceiling is. I'm not going to leave anything to chance, which I really appreciate, because I think oftentimes it's easy for athletes to get it flipped. You know what I mean? Like, this is the outcome, and if I don't reach the outcome, the rest of the stuff is just nonsense. Or if I don't get the minutes I want, or play the position I want, or get the accolades I want, or really, well, then I just wasted all this. It's like, well, wait a second. This is all the transferable stuff, that's really kind of about who you're becoming as a person, not necessarily who you're becoming as an athlete. You want to talk about that a little bit? Because that certainly resonated, as someone who coached you and then has watched you mature throughout the other stages of your life. Those are elements that have just, they're to your core. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think when it really came down to, obviously, like I said, I knew I couldn't control what was going to happen at the end of the day, but all that I could control was what I did every single day. But that it really truly became an addiction to try to just like become as good as you possibly could be every single day, to chase perfection, whatever that perfection meant for me. It wasn't about anybody else, right? That was it. So, and I found that the more that I was kind of sharpening the mental toughness tool, nothing became intimidating for me. Nothing. Because I look at everything and everything became a challenge, and then it became, okay, how do I solve this challenge, as opposed to like, that's an impossible task and get deterred from anything, which is now like, that's the only reason why I got this job, why I've been coaching. Like, there was a point in time where I was the youngest professional head coach in the world in a top 20 league. And the only reason that I had the job, it's not because I was the smartest. It's not because I was the best looking. It's not because I was the most articulate or that, that people liked me. It was literally because I was willing to, when I was an assistant coach, I was willing to just know that I had to go through the mud to come out the other side and to possibly even have a shot. Like, I understood that hard work doesn't guarantee you anything. That's just the price of admission for walking in the door. That's it, right? And that if I got an opportunity on the other side, that was great. But then what kept feeding that was just this sense of empowerment that I would get every day, where like, you do hard things every day and you get a little bit tougher. It's just like working on your jump shot. You do something that's uncomfortable every single day, especially early in the morning when you don't want to do it. Anybody can work out. Anybody can do stuff they don't like to do at 7 p.m. at night. Anybody. Can you do that when your body hurts? It's -20 outside. You got to get to the car. You're freezing. You got a whole long day ahead of you. You don't know how you're going to get through the day because you've been doing it now for 100 straight days. And can you find kind of that like fortitude in the moment to not only get through it, but to pursue excellence in that moment? And that is like, when you can get to that level, the world is kind of your oyster, right? And it's fun, because everything then is just a challenge, and it becomes more than just sport. You're the better you push yourself in the drill for a jumper. Well, like, now I'm going to go pursue excellence in the classroom too, because you don't want to suck. You get this voice in your head where it's you're like, man, you're being soft, right? And when you start to build on that, just like what I was saying earlier, just like your jump shot, the more you practice it, the better it's going to get. The more that you sharpen your mind, the tougher you're going to get every single day. And it's fun. It's fun to see that transformation and feel that in yourself.
No doubt. And you certainly had an incredible run in terms of which it wasn't the aim, but you had the accolades that ultimately started to come with it, right? You eventually moved into the starting lineup your sophomore year. You were a repeat all-conference player in the Suburban East. And reminding people, during your era, the Suburban East was full of multiple top-ranked 4A basketball schools, Stillwater and Cretin-Durham Hall and Mounds View to the like. And I've shared with people, there was a year in Minnesota when, the 8 teams that qualified for the big school 4A state tournament, 4 of them came out of our conference. So you could not have played in a tougher league and in a tougher time for boys basketball in this particular community. But you're an all-state player. When you graduate, you finish as the school's all-time leading scorer. And you just made incredible growth, not only physically and athletically, but also as a person. So when you think about that stretch, this is always kind of a challenging question to answer, but are there a couple moments that stick out to you the most? I mean, is there a game? Is there a practice? Is there a shot? Is there an interaction with an opponent or a teammate? Like, when you just kind of think back, I mean, what sticks out to you? Like, what are some of those moments that resonate, that you remember most?
This is a great question. I talk about this with my dad sometimes. So you do all this work behind the scenes, right? Nobody knows, and oftentimes most athletes stump themselves, because if you remove the psychological barriers that you place on yourself, it would be easy. But that's what separates kind of the men from the boys, so to speak, right? And oftentimes, self-awareness is a gift and a curse, because you'll see guys like a Nick Young in the NBA or whatever, right? Who, like, he's irrational. And then you'll find guys who, like, you put them in a workout and they're like a world beater, and then they can't seem to put it together because they care too much about everything that's happening. And I remember my sophomore year, I come down there and I had these goals for myself. I didn't know, right? Like, I was a little bit naive in terms of how good the competition level was. So I actually thought it was better than it was. And then I realized, these guys aren't working like I am, but I was so physically underdeveloped compared to these guys that I felt like, man, like, I'm just never going to catch up. And I remember I was coming off, I think I was coming off the bench even on the JV team as a sophomore. And we're like 5 games into the season. And my first game we play, who the heck knows what? I got picked like 4 times in the front court, like the ball stolen from me. I'm playing JV, and I'm thinking, I remember looking back and I would frame it in my mind. I'm like, Michael Jordan got cut from his varsity team. So, like, I'm on my way. I can still make it. I would literally, like, think these thoughts because I was so scared of failing, right? And anyways, we go to Cretin-Durham Hall and we're down like 30. Like, that team was stacked. Private school and a public school conference. We're down 30. We got Scott Kelly, Joel. What was Joel's last name again?
Joel Molitor.
Yeah, Joel Molitor. We got Nick Marsh. Yeah. Anyways, we got these older guys, and I'm a sophomore, and I don't want to overstep, but you throw me in the game, we're down 30 or something like that. And I catch the ball, and I had never, like, taken shots that were like quick trigger shots at that point, where I just had, like, confidence. Like, I knew as soon as I touched it, it was going up. I catch the ball on the left wing, and it was almost like an out-of-body experience because I was so nervous that you threw me in the game. I catch the ball. I think I was, like, cutting across the top of the key. I catch the ball, and I'm on the left side of Cretin-Durham Hall, and I put up a shot. I don't even know what finger it came off. I felt like the ball came off the side of my hand, and the ball went in. And it was like this weight. Literally, in that moment, it was like this weight came off my shoulders, and I knew that I belonged there. And then that kind of, there was highs and lows from that point going forward. And then I remember, so that kind of started it. That started my confidence. And then we played Blaine. We played Blaine High School. They had Patrick O'Brien. It was right before Christmas, and I was about to go home. And I remember that I had, I think, 19 points. And then from that point forward, I was like, okay, I need to pay my dues and I need to navigate this thing, but there's no way that I'm coming out of this thing and I'm not gonna make it. Whatever make it meant to me at that point, I don't know. But at least at that standpoint, I was like, okay, I'm not going back home. I'm gonna stay on the team. I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna find a way to make it work. But it was those 2 moments for sure. And it was literally one shot. It was that one shot at Cretin-Durham Hall. Yep. And it felt like luck because I don't remember, as a shooter, you shoot the ball, it's going in half the time. I didn't know because I was so nervous. It was like I couldn't even feel my body. I was probably convulsing. But that was it. That was
great.
The moment. And then
that's great.
I still think about that all the time.
That's awesome.
Shot, I can, like, feel it. It's crazy.
As you matured into a junior, senior, is there a game or two or a shot or two that stick out? We were good. We weren't great, but we were very good. We won more than we lost, top half of the league both years, playoff wins in the section both years. And there's a lot that goes into it. I'm always just fascinated what you might remember or what games stick out to
you. I remember my first game of my junior year, I had 37, I believe it was, or something like that. Like, I had a really good game. So I come back I played Howard Pull in between my sophomore and my junior year. And I didn't know. I just go to this gym, and I was like, all right, now I made the team. If that's where I want to go, that's the next logical step for me. I need to prove that I can guard these guys and I can play at that level physically and athletically. And I want to always constantly pursue this level of discomfort so that I'm not stagnated. Because once I got into the American system and I started to look around at how these guys were working, I was like, okay, they're not willing to do what you're willing to do every single day. That's a good start. But that's not enough because I could only push myself so far, right? So then I go to this tryout. I think it was like Minneapolis South or something like that. I care Jefferson or something like that. I go to this tryout, and like I'm probably the only white kid in the gym. And I have the tryout of my life because again, every opportunity that came up, I looked at it like I can't fail. Like I was just my level of focus was just asinine because I was so scared of not making it and getting cut. I'd been cut. I got cut when I was 12 years old from my regional team in a town in Pitt Meadows, which is it's smaller than Hastings. So I never wanted to feel that again. And I go to, Howard Pulley, and I make this team. And throughout that summer, like I'm playing guys that now were in the NBA. And I come back to Hastings that year, and I'm looking around in the fall, and I'm like, okay, I've developed a little bit athletically. I just got absolutely dominated, like from a defense. Yeah, I could shoot the ball. I was the white kid that sat in the corner and shot the ball. But once you get exposed to a certain level, you come back. And had I changed that much physically, or had my game improved that much? Probably not. But I took like the mental shackles off of me, and I just knew that I'm looking around like these guys. If I can guard Sharon Collins, who played for the Illinois Warriors and played at Kansas and played in the NBA, and this guy's 5'10", 205 windmilling, and I got to guard this guy, I can go guard Buddy from Stillwater. And I can, so that really kind of opened it up for me. And I think that set the tone for myself in the junior year. And then that was probably one of my most memorable games. And that year was just awesome. I mean, we had such a good team. Like those guys they took me under their wing, and they kind of let me be me. And obviously I think I never tried to go into a situation and acted like I deserved something, but at a certain point, when other people see that you are working at such a level that is just way higher than what they're willing to do, and a lot of times they'll step aside, but I wanted it to be like so glaring that nobody could ever say anything to me because I knew that I was young. I knew that I was coming from a different country. I knew that these guys had grew up playing together. And I didn't want to be perceived as selfish or self-serving, but I knew, okay, how do I combat that? And how do I combat that also in my own head where like, I'll be afraid to step on toes, just work at a level that is like so asinine that nobody can say anything to you. Right. But they were awesome. That group was such an awesome group of guys. I mean, they were like best friends. It was cool. It was the first team that I ever played on in my life, and probably still to this day, where everybody was friends. Everybody got along and everyone wanted everybody else to win. And it was a really great experience between Bobby and all those guys, right? So that was a really special year. I still look back. That was probably my favorite year of basketball that I've ever had in my life because once you start to climb the ladder, there's always ulterior motives, but at that point, it was just the game was pure.
Yep.
And it was a great year.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question on this particular stage. Who did you either enjoy playing with, or maybe who are some of the guys you enjoyed hanging out with, or kind of what was that vibe like? You talk about how important those relationships are and what being on a team is like. What sticks out to you?
Man, my all-time favorite teammate at Hastings, and this is going to surprise you, is Kevin Lauer.
Okay.
Kevin Lauer was my all-time favorite teammate because that guy, he was such a dog. He was all out to handle at times, but man, that guy had a level of like competitiveness and physicality and just like coming to work every day. And he was like irrationally competitive sometimes, right? But like I was looking at that guy and I'm thinking, okay, this guy's going to sun me. Like if I don't come ready to practice every single day, I might be better than Kevin. I might be able to shoot it better than him. I might be more talented than him, but he was so physical that I was just like, that drove me because I knew that really drove me to work on my weaknesses. So from like a performance standpoint, because Kev was so physical, I was like, okay, I got to get in the weight room because I'm going to get sunned in practice. And, as you're trying to climb, you're trying to position yourself as well as position the team to succeed, but like get yourself in the pecking order where you're the guy. But I knew that if I came to practice every day and Kev dominated me physically, that there's no way that I, in my right mind, could go into a game and say I'm the best player on this team, and like that I deserve to take these shots. So from a competitive standpoint, it was Kevin Lauer. From a like relationship standpoint, I mean, there were so many good guys. Jake Kranz, Joe Schnell, a really good friend, Alex Bielke, who ended up stopped playing, but Alex still a very good friend of mine to this day. Bobby Schmitz, I think about Big E. I still keep in touch with E. He hits me up all the time. He would come in the morning with me. I mean, I'm probably leaving guys out, but yeah,
it's inevitable. It's a hard question to answer, but it's fun to let people think back a little bit.
Yeah. In turn, when I was a little bit younger, my junior year, like Mickey Nelson and Luke Butsy were like two of the funniest dudes that I've ever seen, I've ever met in my entire life. Like the things that Butsy would say was so funny, man. Every day, yeah. He was the man. And then in terms of just like relationships, I mean, like Lutz and CB, like just such good dudes, dudes. I look back at like their contribution, and obviously you're the head coach though. Those guys are the assistant coach, and like they were perfect. They were absolutely perfect. They were so supportive, but just they would poke you enough just to let you know, like, you ain't all that. But the amount of time that like was put in top to bottom in that program from you guys was just it was special. I don't think that I haven't seen it, since. So it was a
lot of fun.
So appreciative of all the people. Yeah,
for sure. Any favorite opponent or maybe a favorite gym to play in?
Mounds View, hands down.
Yeah,
for sure, without question. I remember we were there. I think it was junior year. No, maybe it was senior. When did we play McHale's kid?
Ooh, yeah, Joey McHale. Man, maybe junior year. Yeah, I don't know if I can remember.
Yeah, I think it was. They were good. Like they had Travis Bush. Yeah, so it was because they had Travis Bush. They had McHale's kid. They had who's the kid that was the quarterback at Minnesota?
Yeah, Adam Weber.
Adam something.
Yep.
Adam Weber. Like they had a bunch of studs. We had no business competing with those guys. No business at all. And I think they smacked us a couple of times, but we had a pretty competitive game with them at Mounds View. It was an intimate gym. Did Ziggy calls, like iconic. He still hits me up sometimes. He's such a good guy. He's a funny dude. But that because of like the historic nature of that school. And I knew that you had a relationship with Ziggy as well. It just like that was my favorite place to play by far. Yeah. The place is packed. I don't know what I'm getting into. These students are getting all over you. I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I came down for.
That's right. It's kind of like playing at Duke at the high school level. A smaller, compacted, but really intense traditional place. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And then a close second, I don't want to leave these guys out, was Park. I remember I got a Canadian tattoo. Do you remember this? I called you and I was like, can I get a tattoo? Do you remember this? So I'm 15 or 16-year-old kid. I remember walking into this tattoo parlor. I don't know anything. And the guy thinks I'm 19 years old. So I get a tattoo. I come back to Minnesota. I got this maple leaf tattoo on my shoulder. I'm like, all right, I'm proud Canadian. I'm going down there. I remember we were at I think it was Park. In our student section, a bunch of friends started chanting Canada, and the whole crowd starts chanting USA. Do you remember that? It was
vaguely
the entire student section was drowning them out. And I remember my dad, we talk about this, and he's like, man, like in that moment, like I didn't know what to do. He's like, I'm smiling, but like we're in the US and like this is a very, very proud country. Are we gonna get run out of the gym here? Like
oh God, that's hilarious. So you graduate again, you've got this incredible journey of 3+ years from British Columbia to Hastings, Minnesota. And then post-secondary, you have a stop at Mankato State and then back to BC. Tell us about your kind of post-secondary transition between high school and kind of what that looked like. And I know there's this is one of the great things about your story is that it's a reminder, life doesn't work in straight lines. There's zigzags, there's backups, but yet there's a progression that you're always kind of working towards. So it's kind of Mankato, it's BC, and then you got this professional opportunity. It's hard to package all that in a few minutes, but walk us through a little bit in terms of kind of the milestones or kind of how it all fit together for you after you graduated from Hastings.
So it actually starts before that. starts between my junior and my senior year. I was really homesick, and I started to, for my whole life, I was very kind of antisocial, and basketball was all that I knew. And then I kind of came into my own because in the U.S., like, if you're good at sports, people are gonna like you. So I kind of became more social. So I started going out to parties and stuff and making friends and whatever, right? And I kind of got a little bit sidetracked, I think, and a little bit distracted. I got like my first real girlfriend. So I go home that summer and I'm like head over heels in love. I'm 16 years old. I don't know anything about the world. Well, I'm homesick when I come back. And I didn't play pulley that year because I had this girlfriend, and like I just matured a little bit later. I had blocked everything off to that point. It was only basketball. And then all of a sudden you open up Pandora's box and I'm like, oh my God, this is what real life is like. Like, you actually can have relationships with people. There's more than basketball. So I didn't play pulley that year. So I have this, whatever, my junior year, right, where I'm averaging, I think I led our conference in scoring, I believe. And I was somewhere top 5 in the metro in scoring or whatever, right? Like 23 a game. At that point, I think I was like 25. And I don't play pulley. Well, you're a white kid playing in suburban Minnesota. They don't really care that I'm averaging 25 because it doesn't matter. They want to see, are you actually going to be able to transfer your skills? Because athletically, I wasn't yet developed, right? So I didn't play on the Howard Pulley circuit. I didn't play on the EYBL circuit that summer. I actually went back and I played in BC. Well, still, there was no YouTube, there was no Instagram, there was none of that. So I basically fell off the face of the earth from a recruiting standpoint to all these people, right? And I didn't know at the time, and I was so caught up in like what I was dealing with that I had pushed so hard for so long that I was burnt out. Admittedly, I was burnt out. I didn't even know if I wanted to play basketball. I remember calling you and saying, I don't know if I want to play, right? I was going to not come back. I ended up realizing, okay, I made a mistake. I took some time away. I love it again. We have a solid senior year. And then I was waiting because now I'm back on the radar for all these schools. Well, I was still a year younger than people. So I was underdeveloped. It's not like I was coming down and beating you just with physicality. And now as a coach, I look back and I'm like, for sure, I would be hesitant to recruit me because you can't quantify like someone's work ethic and their desire to be good. And as a coach at the Division I level, your job is on the line. Those guys, that is the most sharp. It's the U.S. collegiate system is the biggest shark tank of basketball that exists, right? Mm-hmm. So no one's willing to take a chance, and you just need one. Mankato knew that. Matt Margenthaler was the head coach there. He still is. I keep in contact with him still as well. And they kind of saw me play, and I think the level of like toughness that I had that he perceived resonated with him. And it was then a game of dates where I go down to Mankato for this visit, and he knew that it was a matter of time because I was going to be a late signee, that schools were waiting for late scholarships to open up, or did I go JUCO or whatever, right? Because I was 6'4" and I was a white kid who shot it, but I wasn't a great athlete at the time. I wasn't like physically strong. So anyways, Matt and Mankato knew this. It was between me and a guy named Matt Janning. Matt's still a really good friend of mine as well. Remember, he played at Watertown there. Yep. He's making a bunch of money now. He's been played EuroLeague, and anyways, got a sniff in the NBA. But it was between me and Matt. I remember sitting down, and Matt looks at me and my dad, and we're at this cafe right across from the arena, and he basically says, look, we got to know by tomorrow because we're not willing to take the gamble and end up with nothing. You're our number one recruit, Matt's our number 2, but if you don't take the offer by tomorrow. And it was like 3 days later, I had another visit scheduled. And I remember walking out of there, and I just felt so comfortable with how he was. I said, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to go Division I here, but this is the number 1 Division II in the country. Their facilities are incredible. It was like a Division I school essentially, right? And it was in Minnesota. Yep. I had a couple of friends going there, and I just said, I remember talking to you about it, and you told me, don't go where you're wanted, don't go where you want to go. Go where they want you, right? More so than because you see people chase this stuff and then they end up being unhappy. Well, the problem is when I got there, for the first time in my life, I thought I'd made it because that was my goal. Like I had achieved it, right? And I was like, I kind of relaxed. So I go home that summer and I kind of chill a little bit. I don't work as hard as I worked my whole life. I go into Mankato and I'm a freshman, and I got the preseason Division II Player of the Year in Luke Anderson. He played at Minnesota, I think, or he was committed to Minnesota, went to Montana, ended up back in Mankato. I got another guy named Paris Powell, another guy named Tony Thomason, and another guy named Terrence Winder in the very first practice. So I come in as a full ride guy at a Division II when they only have 9 full ride scholarships to give out, right? So the coaches are expecting a lot from me, but I thought I was going to just walk in and play. First practice, we do a rebounding drill. Coach throws the ball up, 2-on-2 war. I go like swim over the top. I clip Terrence Winder in the face. Terrence Winder looked like Lil Wayne. Like, I'm scared of this guy. I hit him in his face and he starts bleeding from his eye because I hit him with my elbow. He tries to fight me in the middle of practice. 17 years old. I barely just like, I'm not even through puberty. This guy's a grown man. He's 24 years old. I'm terrified. The rest of the year, that was it. That was it. In that moment right there, I was done. The next practice, we do this one-on-one drill. And the coach, we had to stop everybody. Coach throws the balls up. I'm on defense for 1 hour. He wouldn't let me off until I got stops. 1 hour I played defense. I was so tired. It looked like you were dragging me through mud. Right. And at that point, like, it was over for me because he knew that, look, this kid's not ready to play from a physical standpoint. And then I was away from home. I wasn't in contact with my dad. And I just kind of, again, like, really fell out of love with the game. And I started to, when your self-identity is so intertwined with performance, I was kind of lost. So after that year, I went home and I just was like, this is crazy where I'm at. I don't love basketball anymore. This is no longer fun for me. It's something I'm doing for other people. I'm not doing it for myself. And I was going to quit. And I go home, and a buddy of mine was going to the school called UFV. He was like my childhood best friend. And the coach was a new coach. He was the Canadian Coach of the Year at that point. And I just started like showing up to open gyms after he asked me to. And I'm like, but I'm not going here. Like, I'm watching, my boys are playing in the show, and then the big dance and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not going to UFV in Canada. Like, are you insane? Well, after about 6 weeks of going out, I really loved basketball. And I realized, like, this ain't about anybody else. I just want to be happy playing this game and get an education at this point. I was a little bit lost. I ended up committing. I had to sit out the first half of the year, and then I go to UFV, and was good. I led the conference in scoring, it's probably comparable to about middle of the pack D2. And then after that year, I realized, okay, I'm here now. My clock has been ticking. I have that juice again in terms of the passion for the game, but I get 5 years in Canada as opposed to 4, and I would have only had 2 years left, and I still had another 4 years left or 3 years left. So I said, you know what? I'm going to transfer to this school called UBC, which is kind of the Duke of Canada, so to speak, and get a really good education and be close to home. And I have the amenities, and I can train year round. In NCAA, you have a short period of time, right? So I did that. I had a good career there. I ended up being all Canadian, which is like you're one of the top 5, whatever, in the country, our little mini version of all American. And we were good. We went to the national championship 3 times. I think it's the top 8 schools. We spent a lot of time as number 1 in the country. But throughout that whole journey, I've learned so much about just like chaos, absolute chaos. And just like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. And this is a really ugly journey, but I'm going to figure it out. And yeah. And then from there, I ended up going overseas. But it was definitely crazy for sure. Talk about not linear path.
Yeah. But you're able to, again, sustain those character traits that have always brought you through at each stage, even if you have to kind of cycle a little bit. That's kind of what life is. We've had, we've had a number of Hastings High School graduates play professional sports, actually get a salary for playing the game. But like most places, it's still a small group. You reach that level. How the heck did that happen? After you were done at UBC, and just give us a quick snapshot of where you played and for how long, and what being a pro basketball player in Europe was all about.
Oh man, you can survive in Europe. You can survive anywhere, first of all. So I had the new assistant coach at UBC had played 20 years professionally. He was just coming in. I just missed him. It was his first year. And I was working out with no guarantee that I was going to go anywhere. But I was like so just determined because of my journey, right? It really bothered me that all my peers were playing and they had made it to that level. And I felt like, okay, I was as good as you. I still feel like I'm as good as you. And I had this crazy journey that I kind of shot myself in the foot with. Now I look back and I'm eternally grateful that I did have that crazy journey because, you can always overcome. But at the time it bothered me because I didn't want to look at it and say, what if? So I end up getting this contract for like no money. Like I was making $2,500 USD a month because they realize, you have like your numbers are good, but like, what is the level of play like? They don't know at the time. What the heck is Canada basketball like, right? So I go over there and I thought, okay, whatever, middle of the pack league. I have no idea what I'm getting into. But again, I was that summer I trained even at a higher level than I'd ever trained. I was going 3 times a day. I was making 1,000 jumpers a day. I was playing every day. I was running at least 15 kilometers every day, lifting twice a day, doing yoga, watching film. I was psychotic. I actually put micro tears in my Achilles because I couldn't get into a gym. So I was shooting at the beach in the wind to try to get my shots up because I had to hit my mark. It's insane. So I go down there and I got to get through 30 days of my contract. The first 30 days were not guaranteed because I was unproven. So I go down there and I just felt like my back was against the wall and I needed to make it. So like I was going to play way harder than everybody. So even if they were better than me, I was going to play harder. I didn't know what I was getting into. I had a teammate that played at Mizzou, Justin Safford. I had another guard on my team named Gerald Boston that played Division II at Barton. I think they won the national championship or something, the Division II level. It's good. And then a lot of the other guys in the league were like high major Division I guys. Played against Rodney Magruder. He's now in the league. Played against Justin Holiday. He's now in the league. Well, day 29 of my contract, we're playing this team called Poch. And I know to this point, I've outperformed my salary, but I have no idea the landscape of pro basketball. So I don't know that I'm making $2,500 a month. Well, what the GM perceives is I'm playing like a $10,000 a month player in terms of like if you actually extrapolate the data to what they would do, right? With analytics. So I don't know. I'm still paranoid. Day 29, we play this team called Poch, and people don't know like how many good basketball players there are in the world until you go play pro. Everyone's got a story. Day 29, I play a guy named Darrell Summers. Darrell Summers had just played at Michigan State. He was in the Final Four. He was a projected first-round draft pick, and I had watched this guy play in the Final Four like 4 months prior. So I'm looking at day 29. I'm thinking, man, if I lose this game and I'm bad, I'm going home. This is it. So I'm like, but I have no idea that I'm safe no matter what. They told me after, but in that moment, I'm like, yo, if I don't like play out of my mind, I'm going home. And that's pro basketball. So Darrell Summers played in the Final Four. He was projected first-round draft pick, got caught, I think, smoking or something, drops the second round, and gets cut from whatever team he was with. Ends up in Australia, is a jerk again. They cut him again. Goes back to like those intangibles, right? Like just be a good teammate. Like people want to be around you. Anyways, he ends up now in the middle of the pack league in Hungary, and day 29, I'm playing this guy, and I know that if I play Darrell Summers one-on-one straight up, he beats me 11-2. Doesn't matter how much time I put in. Like he is just physically, he's 6'8" with a 6'10" wingspan and plays the 2-3. So that game I play out of my mind, but I'm talking like I probably only created like 2 buckets off of like the dribble. Everything else was back cuts, offensive rebounds, open shots, running the lane, up screen slips, like very, very simple stuff. So I finished the game. I have 28, and he just like wasn't willing to work because he had dropped. So like I deny him the ball. I would extend his catches. He was just bad. He didn't want to be there. He has 6 points. He gets sent home after the game. Never played pro basketball ever again. Going from first-round draft pick, and I make this team. So I was like, okay, I'm safe, right? But I tell that story to a lot of kids because it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter where you're from. It's where you're at, right? It doesn't matter how you get there. You'll find a way if you really want to find a way and you want it bad enough. And then I ended up getting hurt that year because I trained so hard in the summer that my body was already like it was on the brink. Like I couldn't even do a calf raise. So right after I signed the contract, they evaluated my Achilles and they looked at it and they're like, yo, we're putting you in a boot for 8 weeks. Like this is bad. You're going to tear your Achilles completely. Mm-hmm. So then that set me back that year. And then I was fighting for another contract. I ended up in Romania the next year, which was wild because I was in Transylvania. Like literally that's a real place. I went to Dracula's castle. I lived in a town called Mediash, and we had a really good team, but I was like kind of burnt out at that point just from this whole thing. And I was like, man, like where is this going to go? Because it's hard. You're still not making a lot of money. I mean, I was making $5,000 a month USD as a 24-year-old at the time. It seemed like a lot of money, but I was just like concerned about life skills. I was a little bit older because I'd taken a while to get through university. It's not like I graduated like at 21 years old. And I had a buddy who was, so I get through the season in Romania. It was okay. We had, I had a really good team. We had Lithuanian point guarders on the national team. I had 5 Serbians. I had Moldovan guy. We were good. The shooter from Belarus who was on the national team there. We were solid. And then after that year, I actually signed to go play in France, in the south of France. Now I look back I'm like, man, I should have taken the contract. But my buddy he was the global brand director at Nike he was the North America brand director at Nike basketball. And we had started a basketball academy that summer as a sheer passion project. And it took off like gangbusters. And this is 2014. It was called the Vancouver Basketball Academy. And after the season, our summer, we're like, yo, like this is like real. Like this is a real beast that we've created here very fast. But I never wanted to do basketball, especially at the youth level, just for money, because it changes the whole outlook of everything you're doing. And you can't really like coach like with the right heart's intent, I found, because you're relying on the income. It changes the name of the game. So I say, man, like I'm going to go back and play in France. And he says, no, don't do that. He just left Nike. And he was working at this design agency, like a media agency, essentially, interactive digital marketing agency. And he goes, why don't you come work at the agency and be a project manager? And I was like, what? Like, dude, I don't even know how to write an email properly. Like, what are you talking about? And I looked at all the cards and I'm like, you know what? Like, this is a great opportunity. He put me on the Nike account, the Brand Jordan account, and the NBA account right away. And that was forget basketball. That was the craziest stretch of my life that I've ever had. Because I was, I was again still afraid of failure. I didn't want to look like a schmuck. I didn't want to look like my boy was hooking me up. So I was like sleeping in server closets at nighttime. I wouldn't go home. I was learning software of how to edit like decks so I could wake up in the morning and present to the team. And it was crazy, but it was such a good experience. And I learned so much about just the world and marketing and media and how to be a professional and all that stuff. And everything that I learned in basketball directly translated to where I was at. And, I did that for 5 years and it was great. I mean, I brushed shoulders with every person you could possibly want to meet except Kobe. The only guy I did not meet was Kobe Bryant, who was like my childhood hero. But everybody else I had an opportunity to meet. And then after that, I had a buddy. I was actually at my 10-year reunion in Hastings, and a good friend of mine who kind of mentored me through college, who was like me. His name was Kyle Julius. Played in Italy, played on the Canadian national team. He's a hard-nosed white boy from Thunder Bay, Ontario, who like made something of himself. And I looked at him when I was coming up and I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but the story's nuts and I need to know exactly what he did. So Kyle mentored me through college, through pro, all that stuff. Well, he was coaching a pro basketball team in London. And I was doing a little bit of the skill development stuff. And, he knew me through the grapevine and cold calls me. And at the time, I'm 25. I'm making like over 100 grand a year. I think I got it made, but I'm miserable now because I'm working 18-hour days every day. And I miss basketball, been away from it. I was on the marketing side, but I missed the game. I missed competitiveness. And I had so many friends that continued to play and I chose to cap it, right? Because I was scared I didn't have life skills because I put all my eggs in one basket. And he cold calls me and I'm literally outside the gym at my 10-year reunion in Hastings. I hadn't been back in like 5 years. And he goes, I got this opportunity where I get an assistant coach. Are you interested in coaching? And I never wanted to be a coach because I was scared of people like me. I'm like, man, I got to deal with people like that idiot. And on a whim, I was like sitting there. I looked at my dad. I didn't even talk to my dad about it. He heard me on the phone. I was on speaker walking around right at the loop where the buses pick people up. And I was like, you know what? I'm in. So I called my boy Mark. I said, hey, look, man, this came up. I quit. I went to go work for $2,000 Canadian a month. I couldn't even pay anything. I was that broke. And then I was working. We didn't have what's called synergy at the time. So my role was basically working out the guys, right? Player development stuff, cutting all the film, preparing the scouts, preparing player scouts and like team concept scouts. But I didn't have synergy and I knew that I didn't want to look like a schmuck again. So we'd played 40 games in 4 months. We would do 2-a-days in terms of practice and workouts. And I would cut between 40 to 70 hours of film a week by hand. No synergy, no nothing. But through that process, on top of my job, so it was like 110 hour weeks every week. But through that process, I learned so much about coaching and just like as a player, you're so concerned with what's in front of you. That's it. As a coach, you're concerned about everything, and you have to be able to look at it and almost like literally from not even an existential standpoint, from a tangible standpoint, you need to be able to look at the floor right fast and figure, okay, what is happening over here from a geometry standpoint that is messing with spacing and is like a domino that's affecting the whole thing. I couldn't do that at the time because it was happening so fast. But through watching all of that film, I got there fast, and I got there faster than I think most people do, just because I had to, because of the circumstance. So that was great. I had Royce White. You remember Royce White? Played
Yep.
at Hopkins. So Royce
Yep.
had an interesting career, right? And he took the whole stand on mental health and all that. So we actually had Royce White in the NBL. Well, this guy was an absolute freak. He's 6'8", 260. He did things that like LeBron does. Legitimately, he's a freak. And we had a guy named Ryan Anderson who played at Nebraska. We had, we the best team in league history. We go 35-5 and we win the championship. And Kyle ended up moving on. The next year, I ended up in St. John's, Newfoundland, as basically a co-head coach with a guy named Carl English, who was on the Canadian national team that I looked up to when I was young. Was the assistant there that year. The next year, I was head coach. My first head, that was 29, and I had Glenn Davis, remember Big Baby?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We brought
Celtics, LSU.
Brought in Big Baby, which was less than desirable, that experience, but we'll leave that.
Yeah.
And from there, just kind of kept rolling with it, and then actually ended up going back to London, where I'm at now, and was there pre-pandemic. We were top in the league, and then the season got shut down, and it's been a crazy 2 years. Like, I got back into working with Mark a little bit, my buddy Mark at the agency. I actually spent 6 weeks in the NBA bubble, which was a little bit wild. And here we are again, back at it, coaching again and stuff, and just waiting for the season to start. And so it's been a crazy ride, man. It's been insane, but I wouldn't change it for the world. In the moment, it really sucks sometimes, but the level of fortitude that I've learned from throughout the process of just committing and sticking to your guns and just believing that things are going to work out if you just handle what you can handle. You can't control everything else, and sometimes you're going to make dumb decisions and you're going to regret some things, but those regrets will become a lot easier to stomach the harder that you work on the things that you can control every day. So I don't really, when I look back at it all, I don't really have any regrets, because I don't think that I would be kind of the human being that I am today. Not that I'm all the way there. It's always a work in progress, but from a basketball and a career trajectory standpoint, that I would be where I'm at if it wasn't for all this stuff. So,
well, it's a perfect segue to kind of the final thing that we like to do, and I'll ask you a couple final questions here. But you had mentioned at one point as we're recording this that everyone's got a story. You have yours. I think one of the gifts that you bring is that you've been even more and more assertive and creative, and you've been sharing that story in so many different ways, right? You're impacting the guys, adults that you're coaching, in pro basketball with one version of that story. You're impacting 14-year-old kids in the summer with a different version of that story. Even taking an hour to do a podcast like this, you know what I mean? It's really fun for me to be able just to kind of listen back to it, but also watch from a distance all the different ways that you're paying it back and kind of paying it forward, as it were, all those different influences and pieces of your journey that you've had. It's really cool. So with that being said, I'm going to give you a few final prompts. And you've been coached by all kinds of coaches. If there are coaches that are listening to this and have hung with us to the end here, if you could give Hastings High School coaches or even youth coaches in town a piece of advice, a word of wisdom, a couple tidbits, what would you say to those coaches?
First of all, you need to be the hardest worker in the room, and talk is cheap. So you need to lead by example, right? I think that every team always embodies what the coach is all about. Kids these days are smarter than they ever have been, and they pick up on everything. And now with the way that social media is and the exposure that everyone has, that nothing is private, you have to be that dude. If you really want to max out as a coach and get the most out of your athletes, be the person that you're trying to push these kids to be. You got to live it first and foremost, right? Because they'll sniff that out real quick. And then that ties into obviously what you're going to learn and be a lifelong learner, and all those good things that you want to be as a coach But ultimately, what it really comes down to at the end of the day is people don't care how much you know, people care how much you care. It's what it always comes back to. It's always relationships. Like I look back to mine and your relationship, and for sure, have I had coaches that now, at the time, I think that you know everything about basketball, and I look back and I'm like, he didn't know everything about basketball. He was a high school teacher who played Division III football, right?
Yeah.
But I look back at my journey, and I've had now these coaches that are like renowned international coaches. But the relationship that me and you have, because of what you invested into me and you believed in me at a young age, changed my entire life. So it has nothing to do with like, sure, can I remember some games more than others? For sure. But when I really look back at it, does that matter? Like, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when you look back at it. And I think like that's a testament to you and the coaching staff there. And people don't care how much you know, they care how much you care. And if you really invest in people, people are going to gravitate towards that, and they're always going to come back. And it might be tough in the moment. You might have to have hard discussions with parents. You might have to have hard discussions with players, and you might have to do things that are not always on the up and up, and people aren't going to like in that moment. But they'll thank you after the fact if you stick to your guns, right? And you do things the right way. Like you kicked me out of a game one day. I learned my lesson real fast. I never do that ever again. And I don't act like that now. I don't act entitled because you had the stones to, in the moment in the big game, kick me out of the game, right? Because I was acting like a little jerk. And sometimes it's tough love, and sometimes it's compassion, and it's nobody. I look at coaching. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but from what I hear, and I look at I look at it and look at my parents in a different lens now, because as I'm going through my coaching journey, like I don't have all the answers all the time, and that's fine. You can admit it, right? That you got to be stern, and people have to respect you. But I think approaching it from like a level of humility as well, where it's okay to not know the answers. Work diligently behind the scenes if you don't know. But that coming at it from that perspective is going to give you, it empowers you actually, contrary to what most people would think, being vulnerable, because you just put your cards on the table. Full of compassion that you have for people, and just being sympathetic to their situation will create bonds that are much bigger than a game ever can create. It's not about the game. It's about, 15 years later, hopping on a podcast to talk about how I used to be good at basketball. Now I'm washed up in our journey, right? And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, man. Similar question, different audience. You got a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, you got a kid here in our community listening to this. Same prompt, man. What advice, what guidance, what nugget of feedback? I mean, you've given a buckets full already, and that they can pull out of it, but any final thought or two for the kids that are in kind of a position you once were?
Yeah, just again, to echo the same sentiment, be the hardest worker in the room, and understand that you don't get what you deserve in this life. You get what you have the power to negotiate. That's just the way that it operates. But you don't want to attack. You don't want to approach that from a stance of arrogance. You always want to base everything in humility, and work as hard as you possibly can and max out, like truly max out. And there's no better feeling. Nobody can control you. Nobody controls the narrative of your journey and how you feel about it when you look back, because ultimately you can't really control everything. It's not going to, you might have a coach you like, you might have a coach you don't like, but if you look back and you do everything you possibly can along the way to max out on a day-to-day basis, and then a situation by situation basis, and all that you focus on is literally what's in front of you at that given moment, and trying to be the best version of yourself, everything will take care of itself. It always does. If you don't do that and you make excuses in the moment, you'll be amazed at how fast those add up and become a big problem. And that will transcend sport. So if I would say the biggest takeaway would be being present, pushing yourself in that moment, right? And then trying to really turn that into and frame the suck that it takes, so to speak, to become good at anything. When you start to frame that and you start to play that mental game with you, this is more for kids that are trying to like max out, right? But if you start to learn how to frame that into passion and you enjoy it, then the world's your oyster. Nobody can stop you. Nobody can impact how you feel about, where you end up or how this all turns out for you. But it's always based in work. The work has got to come first. Talk is cheap. Let your work ethic speak for you.
Right on. Well, to formally wrap it up, I'll remind you, we always have a blue seat reserved for you and your family when you want to come back and get a popcorn at the Hastings Fieldhouse. I appreciate your time, man. It's been a blessing since the day we met. It's cool to stay in touch, and I appreciate you sharing what you shared today. Final word is yours.
My final word would just be appreciation for you and your family. I think the relationship that we have, and not only me and you, but your mom, your your dad, your sister, like how my dad's. I mean, when I was talking to, because my dad obviously is battling Parkinson's now, right? And
Yeah.
I remember my dad was telling, we were talking about where you find strength from and where he gets motivation from and stuff. And we talk about your dad often, and my dad taking your dad to the Mayo Clinic. And then
Mm-hmm.
my dad will talk about how still to this day that like empowers him when he's having really tough days. And he sees not only like your dad actually doing it, but like your dad's spirit. So I think I just want to say thank you to you and, you know, your family, and Amy and the kids. I can't believe how big they are now. It's nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, to just see it all and that relationship, I'm eternally grateful, and can't say thank you enough for everything that you guys have done for me and my family.